audio, and then if it doesn't come through the speakers here, we'll just swap it.
All right, so when I do share screen.
Yeah, it'll share this screen. And then if you're not hearing anybody, it should be.
Gotcha. Rebecca, can you give me a test audio?
Test, check. 1, 2, 3, check.
All right.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. All right, I appreciate everybody's patience. We're going to get started here in just one moment. We're going to be doing a hybrid class today. For anybody that's still in here, if you could either hang tight, we're going to do inspections here live. We'll do a hybrid class. Otherwise, you can join us on Zoom. I don't know what to tell you. It'll be recorded. Yeah, for sure. I'm going to mute us here so everybody out there doesn't have to hear all that for the moment. And I'll be sharing screen. Okay. Everyone out in Zoom land, you can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Awesome. We've got some in-person here today as well. So you'll see me with this, our first sort of hybrid class. So I will do my best to be mindful of everything that's happening here and repeat any questions that I hear come through. If you have questions in Zoom, if you could speak loudly and or put it in chat, I'll make sure to look at that as well. And
Can you hear us, Ted?
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to shut some things down here to make this a little bit more efficient. All right. Save. Okay. All right. Let me come back to. Tempted just to share whole desktop here because I think it'll be easier in that way. All right. Zoom land, you should be able to see my screen. Is that true? Importance of a home inspection and all that jazz. All right, last thing before we get started here, I've got to pull up this quick email. Okay. All right. Wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna open up some documents here, just so I have them handy. All right. Wonderful. Okay. There we go. All right. Appreciate everybody's patience. Sorry we're delayed getting started here as we do some of our first hybrid work with classes here. Okay. Let's just open that up and I can minimize the rest of this. Whew. All right, well, welcome. Today we're going to talk about inspections and the madness of inspections and which to get and managing that process. And Rebecca and I have been doing some tweaking, if you will, of how we're handling the inspection process as we have recognized that more and more we are being asked and probably relied upon more than we're comfortable of being the source rather than the source of the source. And the distinction being that we're giving them the choices and information to empower the buyer to make an educated choice about what inspections and whom to get them from. And often, you know, we see and feel that the buyers ultimately just want to be told what to do. And I don't blame them. I want the same thing when I go to Home Depot. But we carry an additional and significant layer of liability in that when we recommend those people, it can bite us. And knock on wood, thankfully, 99% of the time, we don't get bit. But as I try to explain with clients, my value and job is to protect us against the 1%. And that being the what ifs, right? Because there's so many handshake and goodwill, you're my friend type dealings that go on in this business that often I think we get lucky that we're not in trouble more. But until you sit in the broker chair, you realize how unlucky there are so many unlucky stories because they get to hear all the problems. And so some of those can be, and it's a hard spot to sit. I don't disagree that you have a preference on who you recommend or use, and your use of language and forms and things of how you suggest that to them makes a big difference, I think, in what level of responsibility and liability you carry as being the source of the source. And so how do we do that? How do we help them feel more confident in making those choices? And then in what recommendations of inspections do we share? And obviously, if you have questions as we go through this, certainly want this to be interactive. But what I'm going to share with you today is some of the details of how Rebecca and I are handling this process. And it went, it's gotten better and better, and I think it can only improve from there, and be interested in your feedback on that. Good, Rebecca? Sweet. All right. Excellent. And I'll try to be mindful of the chat here as well. So cool. All right. So obviously, you know, in the purchase and sale agreement, I feel like I don't want to spend too much time on this. If you're not familiar with the purchase and sale agreement, there's other classes for that, and inspections and what inspections to get and when. But obviously, it's very important that you understand what is written in this part about inspections and what inspections are to be used. And today I want to cover some things that are beyond just the pass-fail of what's going on in our marketplace, right? And I'm trying to get people to use, or encouraging people to use, the language of an as-is inspection versus a pass-fail inspection, because I've noticed that pass-fail language has just confused some people about, well, what makes it pass or fail? And there is no such thing, right? So let's just try to get away from that language in calling it an as-is inspection, knowing that, of course, as you're coaching your client, when making that offer, even in an as-is inspection, it's not unreasonable to ask the seller to make repairs that are of significance or could prohibit the sale going through from someone else, especially things like radon, or let's say a faulty HVAC system or things like that. But of course, prepare your buyer that they may not have success in getting that addressed. Another thing to consider at this stage, which would be offer stage, and I've noticed some listing agents suggesting this to the buyers, is during the offer period, getting your inspection done so that you can make that offer not contingent on inspection at all. Waive it. It's going to make a significant difference in your ability to put forth a strong offer versus an as-is or pass-fail inspection. So encourage that, or suggest that maybe to the listing agent. Have you considered an offer period that allows for people to get their pre-inspections? Now, again, it's cost and expense that your buyer may not want to consider, but it's something to discuss with them or be mindful that is in the marketplace. Questions or thoughts about that? Yes.
On the sell side, do you recommend providing an inspection just to alleviate the questions about? Obviously, we all want our own inspection, but
Yeah.
would that help in lieu of?
Big time. That's a great question and point. Just for my knowledge, I don't think you can hear that at home. Could you, Rebecca? Okay, cool. Excellent. So the question is, would you recommend getting a home inspection as a listing agent or as a seller? And the answer is I would. And I think for the money and the premium, we'll call it, that these sellers are making, what goodwill to provide to the buyer pool. How wonderful is that? It's $500, right? Maybe they go ahead and get a radon test, get it out of the way. It eliminates that additional element of concern or consideration for the seller as well. Publish it, put it in the MLS remarks. Let's break the mold. You know, I've been in business 20 years. It's often been recommended sellers get one. Few do. I think it's often because they haven't been coached to get one, right? I find that sellers and buyers will do most of what we recommend, and that's a good and a dangerous thing. And so I think often what we're hopefully trying to do, and in this course and others, is sharing best practices in situations and giving those clients a choice and explain to them the value. You know, the guaranteed offer thing, I have a real issue with, because I think people aren't being educated as to the money they're leaving on the table. Okay. So my buddy went to trade in his car on a lease, and Hyundai was going to give him $32,000 and the payoff was $35,000. The guy pulled him aside and said, go to CarMax. I think they'll give you $40,000 for this car. And they did. He sold the car to CarMax for $40,000. The payoff was $35,000. He drove it for a year and made $5,000 because there's a shortage of used cars. It's similar thing exists in the guaranteed offer. Although CarMax, that story is a little bit of an exception in that they make money on margins, right? So guaranteed offers, that's kind of what they do. This inspection would help give that seller knowledge as to what's really going on with their home. Then they could potentially feel they're in a place of disclosure, but put it out there. I mean, in some scenarios, we just put a house on the market in Murfreesboro that needed a lot of work, put it on at $250,000. We have 27 offers as of today. And the winning offer waived their inspection because it's an agent and an investor partner. But Rebecca's also mentioned that inspectors offer a discount on the pre-listing inspection. She's seen as low as $250. But if latent defects are uncovered, they must be disclosed. So there is that piece of the equation. But I think the knowledge and the ability for a buyer to make a waived inspection offer is much worth it, right? So, excellent. All right, so that is purchase and sale agreement. Dana says here, Galaxy Property Inspection offers a mini radon test for $30 paired with the home inspection. Based on those results, you can tell whether you need a 48-hour radon test. Has saved my clients money. Dana, that's awesome. Did you learn about them through our inspection class? Hopefully. Galaxy's really cool. They're different. Yeah?
Yep. He's been a great resource. Oh yeah, he's great. So I appreciate it. I learned it from you and his appliances class.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And so the Galaxy Property Inspections, he's kind of a quirky guy, but I find most of the people you have to be in this business and find happiness and stay sane. But he did an appliance class. It's recorded. It's pretty amazing about all these funny tips about inspections. But I didn't know he offered that $30. That's a sweet deal.
I think it's
Again,
a new
great
feature.
way for that seller to know, hey, this is something to be prepared for. Because I do consult with sellers and tell them, hey, if radon comes in, you're going to likely be prepared for that cost on your end of the hook. Most buyers, and I would encourage yours too, I mean, it's just money, right? Whether it needs an HVAC system or a radon system, it's just money. It's kind of like, I don't care to pay your closing costs. It all looks down to what is the net and how does that affect our risk? And we're paying closing costs. Obviously, you need to account for that in appraisal. So that's the risk and seller paid closing costs. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Dana, for that as well. Any questions on, well, I'm going to add this in inspections. Okay, so because we're covering all things inspections today, give yourself enough time, but understand that the more time you're asking for in the marketplace, the riskier it is to the seller. So probably a good idea before you make an offer is to call your inspector. And if you think you're in a really strong running for this, go ahead and put a slot on the books and ask the inspector if you could do such, okay, to get it already scheduled. I had a situation with another village agent we got called to schedule an appraisal before our offer deadline even concluded. So he put the offer in at 10, he put an expiration of 1. We went on the market at like 9:30 that morning. And he had already scheduled an inspection for that afternoon. And I love the assumptive close, but it's encouraging to everybody just to see that somebody's proactive without being obviously forceful about that. So be mindful of that piece there. He didn't get the house. He didn't get the house. But what he was doing was he was being prepared and proactive, almost too proactive. Okay, so you sent me an offer at 10 with a deadline of 1:30 that day, no, 2 o'clock. And you didn't call me to tell me you submitted the offer. You sent an email that said, respond and let me know if you confirm you received it. So the first communication I got from them was at 2:30. Hey, we sent an offer with a deadline of 2. Did you get it? Or when are we going to hear on that? So yeah, don't be that person. Text at least. Make sure they receive it. Ask the timeline in which they respond if they don't have it already published. Okay. Ask if they have an offer deadline, and whatever they tell you, don't trust it because the seller can accept something early. Okay. Very, very important. All right. When writing your offer, as we've talked about or shown before, and I'm not going to spend too much time on this piece or component, but is when you're writing your offer, I encourage you to get this form signed. And I know, Rebecca, I'm probably going a little bit out of order here, but for those that can't see that super well, this is the importance of inspections and property survey. So this would be another way in which to help give your client some say and involvement, knowledge about why does a buyer need a survey. It's just a good reminder to help you remember the dialogue that you should have with your client about the different pieces of the inspection process. And often if you're not having that dialogue, please talk about surveys, because often people believe, especially from California and other places where a survey is recorded and required as part of the transaction, so you know where your property lines are and what you're buying. Of course, it is not here. And so just because you see a fence doesn't mean that's what you own. And it's just good safekeeping to understand that it can be, it's unreasonable to try to get an inspection done, one, for the demand on surveyors, but the time in which it takes to get it done is to make it a condition of part of the offer. Okay, yeah.
I'm not sure if you may mention this later, but do we have surveyors who are quick?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, I had clients earlier this year who wanted a survey, and I think survey company in Nashville. Or closing it, I mean, not even an inspection.
It's unreal, isn't it? Yeah, I wish I could say yes, and so, but I don't. And my experience is kind of like when I find a good vendor and I share them, the next thing I know, they're none available. And you can see people get pretty protective about their vendors, and that's really terrible, isn't it? But as small business owners, there's economies of scale, and there's a breaking point by which they can handle the load, and they get too busy, and then their pricing of their subs or all the things get challenging. So no, unfortunately, I have to explain to the clients that the survey is likely going to be a post-close operation for you.
And I feel like I'm assuming like 30-minute radon, like with the survey.
Yeah. Yes, Rebecca. Can't hear, and I'm going to share with you. Yes, this is one of the challenges about the hybrid that I'm looking to solve in getting mics so they can hear. So I'm just going to repeat your question. Is there a way to get, are there surveyors that we have a list of surveyors that can come quick? Of course, I shared, unfortunately not, or that, but if you find some, I mean, there are some that have been published in the Village Facebook group that we've had greater success with availability and communication, because that tends to be, they're also just crazy overwhelmed. The other question was, is there like a 30-minute radon or a shorter term? And I think that's what Dana was speaking to, is that a quick survey.
Yeah, where I'm talking about it,
I think so. Yeah. So they're asking, she's asking if there's a quick survey or a method where you could get maybe a better idea if these are even close.
I've done the home staff like walk the lines and I don't know.
Yeah, the home snap walk the lines is a thing. Would I rely on it? No, but does it make me feel a little better? I think between like that, in addition to the CRS tax, has that in there too. Again, it's representative, and unfortunately, the devil's in the details when it comes to a survey. So, the title company too, you could ask them to pull preliminary title work, call the title company, have them pull the address, and they can pull the recorded deed and see if it has any mentions or easements or things like that that may be of concern. What's that?
I've done that for HPR.
Yes, for HPRs, it's a good practice as well. Yep. All right, so I would encourage start utilizing the RF 712, explaining to them, and then they have to acknowledge here whether they're going to get a home inspection and whether they're going to get a survey and whether they're going to elect to have radon gas tested, which I highly, highly encourage. Highly encourage. No, great question. Maria asked if it's just for basement homes. No, it's for condominiums. Yes, I was the unfortunate recipient of being the listing agent for a condo at Icon that tested elevated radon levels. And we had to mitigate radon inside a first floor unit that involved drilling a hole in the concrete in the closet and discharging it out the exterior wall, which you can imagine was quite a fiasco with the HOA. But what we did prior, we may have avoided the drilling. We did first, may have been a part of it, is that we caulked and sealed all the cracks, even the expansion joints that are pre-cut into the concrete floor, because that natural gas is escaping from the gravel subsurface of the concrete. So great question, Maria. Not on basement only homes, especially all homes, but condos too. I used to think how silly to get a termite report if you're on the 6th floor, but those suckers can crawl, I guess, and you have concrete studs. It seems silly or steel framing at Icon. All right, RF 712. So I encourage you to get the RF 712. All right. Questions? Okay. Thank you, Rebecca, for sending me all this good stuff.
Say soon on the past,
Yes.
about soil.
I'm going to repeat it there, Rebecca. I know y'all are listening intently there. So Maria had asked, what about the soil? And so my experience with radon, and I encourage everybody to give yourself a crash course in radon and doing some Google searching, but radon is an odorless, natural, colorless gas that is predominant in our area that comes from a predominance of limestone. And so somewhere in the earth, there's likely cracks and places where that gas is being emitted. And so you don't necessarily need to see rock or believe you're in a rocky space for it to exist there. And my experience in a basement home that has a finished basement, or in the same instance and practicality of how a condo is built, is what they do before they pour a slab is, they dig the hole and then they put down crushed stone, and then they put the base of the concrete, and you put in expansion joints and places where concrete, it's not if it's going to crack, it's when. And so they put in expansion joints. You'll see it in your driveway where you'll see crisscrosses and things. That's where they're planning for concrete, if it's going to crack, that it would crack in those areas. And so it's beneath that space, or even hairline cracks that eventually develop in concrete, where that gas has a tendency to come out. But even things like, they were explaining to me, even spaces where you have base molding and base trim, that's up against the walls. Like if you have cracks and openings in that, obviously gases can come out that area. You won't see it, smell it, see it, or any of those things, but yep, that's what's been shared. Light switches, yeah, there's so many places that we don't think about it until you feel it in a cold winter day and you stand next to your switch next to the outside wall and you can feel cold air coming in at the switch. Well, imagine, I mean, that's just pouring in. I mean, you know, radon works the same way, but it's something else to be mindful of. And during these inspections, why they use thermographic imaging. It's something good to ask your inspector. Do you use thermographic imaging to point out those things? And I can show you an example of what that looks like. We'll come back to that. Yeah. All right. Okay. So this is helping the buyer as far as evaluate inspections and those type of things. And again, this form just helps you have that dialogue with them early on. All right. So encourage you to use this form. Same thing on disclaimer. Disclaimer is another form in which you can use to help them be mindful of inspections. So they need to sign the disclaimer form. If you haven't read it, read it again. I was reminded recently that one of the best practices you can do, Bobby used to make all of her new agents do this, is rewrite the contract in your language. Every paragraph of what does that paragraph say to you? It is belabored, but I will tell you that it becomes second nature of your ways to explain those things, okay? So this is another form in which you can leverage and utilize, and you're required to, but I don't think people explain it. You know, all this stuff is only as good as they understand it. Just because they sign it doesn't mean they understand it. And I think it's super important that you explain to them. And if you're not sure what EFIS is, that you educate yourself on that, right? And EFIS is a synthetic stucco. There's a lot of issues that can come with synthetic stucco if it's misinstallation and trapping moisture. So be mindful of that if you're ever looking at a home that has stucco or what looks like stucco, which is called EFIS. We'll come back to the roof. So I'm going to also suggest that a buyer get a roof evaluation. And I'm going to show you one that we just did here recently. We had done, which is really nice for all the first-time buyers. That's free. Recommend getting a home inspector. You can see some nice lists here. And again, this encourages them to get involved. Sure, that can create extra layers of steps, but if you inform them early, they can do some of this research. They ultimately don't want to, right? Like they just tell us who to use. I get it. But be honest and transparent with them about why this is important, because that you don't want to be put in a position of liability, and you're dealing with small business owners who are only as good as that day. And there's a lot of gray area on what they can find or what they will find. And there's so many things that are hidden, and there's so many disclaimers as to what they find or things they don't find. So you just want to give a lot of context to the inspection process. And I'm going to show you in some ways how we do that. So they've signed this disclaimer at the time that they started working with you, but they don't remember that. So it's a good thing to have a revisit of this form and conversation with them, talking about environmental hazards and termites and those kind of things, boundary lines, encroachments, zoning, utility connections, septic systems. This stuff isn't just because somebody got sued. It's really important information that a buyer understands, not to scare them, but to like be mindful to. And then you can help give them context to, you know, if you want to know, you should understand like that there could be sex offenders that live in the neighborhood. And if they're of interest to that, there's websites for that, right? And crime stats and school districts and legal advice and flooding and drainage and all those things. That's right. And I start that conversation with my lack of expertise around schools and crime, because often people believe that, I mean, they really do, that's part of what we do. We help them find good neighborhoods. What does that mean? Yeah, we find good, safe neighborhoods, right? And I mean, there just could be nothing further from the truth than what we really are liable to do or what we quote should be doing. Because I mean, you can lose your license for it. And we were all trained in all of that, but it's just a natural tendency to want to help people. And that's part of how they think and want our help. And we have to explain to them that I truly try to remain ignorant to the schools and the crime of neighborhoods because it's subjective and different for everyone. And you know, if people bought simply on the statistics, they may have never moved to some areas that have some of the most expensive real estate in this city. And one of the cool things about our city too is that it's how blended it is, right? Richland, Cherokee, or excuse me, Central Avenue and Richland, you know, are historically very expensive streets to live on. Less than 1 mile away, there's some statistics that people would find very unfavorable to living in a home or in a neighborhood of that. And so I try to explain people that way, that it's, we're pretty blended beyond what some people really believe or understand. And so they have to be really mindful or careful about those statistics. But it's good conversation. I think it's good value for them to understand what your role is, and it better prepares them for how you're going to be managing the inspection process. Because this market will not stick around where everybody's just willing to buy houses sight unseen and who cares what the inspection says. And I think it's a real part of the value that you can help them in being more prepared for the things of what they're going to be buying and what they need to do after. And so I'm going to use this buyer that we've just worked with as a bit of a case study for our work here today, and kind of show you how we stewarded them through this process. Fair? Awesome. Okay. Let's go back there. Here we go. So you're going to see some of the highlights of this email. It may be hard to read here on screen, but I've tried to make it large. Can you all see it out there in Zoom land? Thumbs up, Rebecca. Can you see my not so good? Comme ci, comme ça. You like that? I should have taken Spanish, friends.
My old
Let's
lady
see.
glasses.
Wow, it's big on my screen. Let's see if I can make it any bigger. Is Rebecca sending this out? We send this out. I mean, we send this out to our clients. She's made some revisions to this. We collaborate on a lot of what we're doing. So what we're going to encourage you is I want you to get the spirit of this so that you can create it for yourself. And why are we putting you through that pain in practice? Because it's important that you do, not because we don't want to share. But what you can see from this is we're giving them, this is the introduction to them about inspection. So this is after they've won the offer. They've gotten the congrats email, which we've shared with you the details of that before, like all the deadlines are spelled out. We don't put the next steps of inspection in that email because there's so much to digest. Inspections needs its own communication point, in our opinion. And so this prepares them. So this says, as we've mentioned in previous email, hiring inspectors to investigate the home you plan to purchase is a very important step in the home buying process, and one we highly recommend you undertake. There are quite a few types of inspections you may elect to have during your inspection period, including but not limited to general home inspection, strongly recommended. We give a price range in here depending on the age, location, and details of the home. I mean, we're saying $450 to $1,000 plus because we're seeing these prices get quite high. And we want to prepare them for the other inspections of all-inclusive what it could look like. So the home inspector will contact you for direct payment and paperwork. Inspection report will not be released until payment is received. That's true of most inspections. You do not need to be present. However, if you have some areas of concern, we can relay that information to the inspector to ensure it is addressed for you specifically. Some general inspectors are also able to provide other types of inspections, including termite, radon, and HVAC. And you might want to consider who you recommend or align or partner or have alignment with that they have those services. Some of the ones that we've listed here do. So it's a one-call shop. Question?
Sorry, off topic. Can you command plus?
Let's try that. There we go. Thank you. Tech tip. And I use that. I don't know why. Can we see that better in Zoom land? Oh yeah, everybody's love. Winner, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Can you see it better? Sweet. All right, so we're showing a couple, we gave two. At least it's not one, but you could give more, but it's two. It has links to their website. And we are encouraging them to get involved in that. Of course, we're showing radon here. Strongly recommended. We give kind of a little highlight. We give a link to where it is and how it's formed and all those things. Termite, give them again, strongly recommended. You'll be required once you're getting a loan and a couple of vendors for that. HVAC, strongly recommended for HVACs older than 5 years. It's a very expensive system. Typically costs 125 for a single unit. I think they do 50 or 75 for the second unit. Highly recommend it. Mr. Cool, I've used quite a bit, and I'll share with you and show you what they provide. It's fantastic. They've been very good. I think it's really important to have a go-to in this department for HVAC. It's a common concern and issue. Roof. As with HVAC, the roof is one of the most expensive and costly to repair parts of the home. An inspection by a bonded roofing company may cost as little as $0. Ostermiller, we've used just even recently, did a great job, and I'll show you what they provided. It reminds them when we have deadlines to get these results, get the inspections completed, receive the results, and communicate to the sellers if you'll accept the property as is, as it was in this case, because that was part of our offer. Otherwise, you just change that to say, to begin the resolution period. There's other inspections you may want to have completed before the end of your period, so please review the following, referencing the things that we've sent them before. Attaches those documents again. So in the email are those documents. We're coming to that. Get excited. All listed documents are attached to this message, so don't make them remember where that stuff is, because half the time they click sign, sign, sign. They don't click the download button, so they have it in their folder. One thing I'm going to encourage is create a Google shared folder with your client, and everything they need to see and have access to lives there, right? And they can forever have access to that folder, and that's where you're going to save their Alta and their home inspection and those type of things, so that, because I have clients call me 10 years later and they want things, and I know right where they are. I'm very meticulous with how I save those things, and I've shared that. The question is, have I ever added clients to vMint? And I haven't. I haven't. I don't know on that. Anyone else? Yep. vMint is likely going to be shifting. I'm told, the accounting department and others will be happy about this, and we'll transition well into that service. If you use .loop, you can share them as part of the loop. So if you're a .looper, you can make the client have certain access. I like the simplicity of the Google Drive, and that you can just give them access to a client shared folder. I'm doing that on a new construction build right now, so that we're not keeping up with emailed and who's looking at what version. We don't have to do that anymore. So, yep. Yes, question is, what about square footage validation? It's a great one. That I have conversation with them, and I believe it's referenced on the form as well. Explaining to them that during the appraisal process, obviously the square footage will be measured. In my experience, if I send 3 appraisers, we'll have 3 different measurements. Why? Well, you can measure from the inside of the walls, the outside of the walls. Some people will account for stairwells and vacant spaces differently. It's just not a science as I think it should be. And if it was radically different, it poses a conversation. The contract's not contingent upon it, but it does pose, and you should be mindful of that, that try to get them off the square footage obsession. But we know that these things are priced in part based on numerical values. And so it can be a delicate conversation in that, and one I'll just share how I have it is, did the home suit your needs based on what you walked through? We all know we'd like it to be bigger or different, but does the home suit your needs regardless of what that number says? And it's just dangerous. I sometimes use it. Buying a house by the foot is like buying a car by the pound, right? And it matters when you're doing a tax deduction, because if a car weighs a certain amount, you can get a different tax deduction based on its gross vehicle weight. So, one of the reasons why the Expedition sold so well is because it exceeds a certain weight. A Range Rover meets a certain weight. They are heavy beasts. And so they can classify as commercial vehicles, and you can write them off differently. Consult your tax professionals. But yeah, there was a contract back in the day that used to have a box that would say the buyer could renegotiate if the number was less than what was listed in the MLS. And that's what began the Tennessee Realtor contract majority. We started having to put in our special terms that buyers to only write contracts on the Tennessee approved Realtor current contract. Yeah. All right. We are coming to the vendor list too, Rebecca. All right. So you have until July 5th to get these completed. These are the other forms. We have provided you with a few options for inspectors for your review if you would like some suggestions, though you are certainly welcome to schedule an inspector of your choosing. Important to mention that, right? So you can prove if it was ever, because here's what's happened. I don't know if you've been in this situation. You go to sell this house 2 years later, and the buyer gets their inspection, and their buyer finds all sorts of things that your inspector that you hired on behalf of your buyer didn't find. And boy, does that feel uncomfortable. Because it's like, well, why did they find that? Especially when it seems seemingly something pretty glaring and obvious. And it's been there for the 2 years that they've owned it. So this helps in that. And then of course it begins the conversation that, hey, they're human, things can get missed. I'm sorry, that's why you don't want to be the one choosing. I'm happy to, I will do all of the coordination and calling and scheduling, but I don't want to be the chooser. So that's why I'm giving those websites, they can make those calls and do that due diligence. While they may not, at least I've helped protect myself. Then we're clearly stating what are the next steps. Review the attached contract documents to inform your decisions on which inspections you want. And you want to be cautious not to give too much direction here, because it's going to force them to do some legwork, right? And it's good practice just for them being a homeowner to work with contractors and evaluation of people, especially first-time people. And then next, reply to this email with the following: yes or no, would you like us to help schedule? Typically, it's good because we'll help get it on timeline. And then specify the types of inspections you want and include the company name. So we're being really clear here of what it is we want them to do next. If they want other inspections, please provide the type. For example, pool, septic, lead-based paint, mold. And either one, the name of the contract inspection company you want, and two, if you would like us to provide you a few suggested inspectors to consider. Well, I'm going to want you to create your own. You want the life hack is watch the video and you can screenshot it. Yep. All right. We share almost everything that we have, but this one we're going to want you to create your own, because I want you to get intentional and intimate about it, right? It's sort of like, unfortunately, like the pain that I'm making our clients go through in going through this too. It's like, can you just do it for us, Ted? And then I have the conversation and go, wow, I would love to do that for you. So in there, you can see in the email, we include the vendor list. And the vendor list is a Tennessee Realtor form, 711. And so you can put your people on there for them to quickly have access to. Again, this class is recorded, so you'll be able to see who we have on here. And I'm going to show you here a little bit on kind of what that came out and looked like. So you can kind of see the inspections. And you can see a little bit here, and I'll try to zoom in on this. I'm pretty sure the plus doesn't work here. Oh my gosh, it does. You're a genius. Never used it in this side. All right, so this can kind of show you how we save documents, just as a side note to this inspection pieces, but in here is the buyer rep documents. Here's the closing documents. Here's the contract package. Here's any HOA documents. Here's our inspections. And here's our offer docs, pre-approval letters. This is how we organize every client folder on a buyer's side. And I've shared this in other classes before, but a good way to do that is you have a folder. If you have a folder, just have a master folder that shows what you would use. You just copy it, okay? Like you master file structure, do not delete. It has in here a buyer transaction. It has all the folders pre-done, right? It has a listing transaction. It has a new construction. And I just copy those into a new client folder and rename it. Helpful? Cool. So inspections. I mentioned in getting these inspections, I'm going to show you kind of what, I'll show you some of these inspections just so you can be familiar with that. So here is Mr. Cool's inspection. And so what I like about this, he puts the address in here, and here shows the thermostat. It's just handy to have, right? It shows you the temperature and it's working properly, temperature of the heating. Here's the filter, gives you the size so that buyer knows what filters to buy. Maybe you could give them a closing gift. It's funny, get them a 12-pack of beer and that 12-pack of filters. They'll appreciate it more. It's easy, it's harder to get. They're going to just see this dust that's happening around the filter. It's not really sealed well. Okay, that's what they're pointing out here. This is another 14 by 20 that needs a filter seal. That's just a little foam around here to make sure it's a tighter seal. Okay, the bonus room needs a grill. You can just see this is the extent to which they go through. They've got a picture of that. I really like this, that they provide you a photo of the specs on the unit. And this is really handy to have. I encourage you on your property to take pictures of these things, same thing on your car, and just have a folder in your photos where all these things live so that you never have to wonder, how old is that? Or those type of things, okay? So you can see there's good detail in this HVAC report. And some cuts in the ductwork.
Protocol, they don't make comments on what brand, like this is.
Yeah. No, they don't. That's my great experience with Mr. Cool is that he doesn't get into his opinions about them. Now, if you have a phone call with him and you asked him specifically, but he's not there to give subjective opinions about those things. And I don't find that he's making erroneous recommendations just to get repair costs. Okay. And so the things that he's mentioning are always spot on. I like the detail of these photos to show the fins being dirty. And these are things for you as an agent to understand and look at, beyond just brushing the debris from a weed eater away from this. It's the little fins in here that get dirty and need to be cleaned. Okay. Water heater's 11 years old, average life 10 to 12. Estimate of repairs. Here's what I really love. There's an estimate for everything that needs to be done that he's showing right there, and has call and schedule it. So I know right there a numerical value. It just checks the box big time on what needs to be done from an HVAC perspective. Okay. And sometimes they'll make recommendations for future things that you might need to do as well. Questions? All right. Make sure I've got. Yeah, it's a good thing to get it, kind of help them build a maintenance schedule for their house. And one of the things that I do with my rental properties, I make them send me a photo every month with the rent of the filter with a date written on it. And they do, because I was taught that by another guy that he would, when they used to submit checks, he would make them tear off the corner of the filter with the date on it and submit it with their check. And it's in the lease. And it is in my lease now that they are required to do this. and they do it. And they complain for the first month, but then they get it. And you know, some property management companies, they'll provide them 12 months worth of filters. They're not that expensive. But don't buy, good also inspection tip to understand, don't necessarily buy the super expensive filters, right? It works like masks. The more masks you wear, the more effective they are at filtering, the harder it is to breathe. So there's a balance between what level of filtration do you need for your home? Do you need this like category 50 HEPA filter that's going to let nothing pass through? It's going to tax that system to work harder to breathe. It's just like a lung. So be mindful to that. Okay. This vendor list, I don't want to miss this opportunity of why it's so important in terms of protecting the agent and the language below it. Okay. Furnishing of any names of vendors, you'll see here, provided by the buyer is done in a ministerial act and only as a courtesy to the undersigned. It does not in any way constitute any warranty representation. So this is not just boilerplate. This is really the protective component of why, when suggesting this, it's not just like an email that could be construed or perceived as like, hey, these are their two people. These are their people. Because that's what we often talk about. We have resources, we have people, we have things and all the things. And it's like, you need some protection. Okay. And they have to sign to this. All right. It's like, oh gosh, another thing to sign, but it's so important. Good. All right. Okay. Let me show you the other piece. This is the roof inspection letter. And so you can see where Ostermiller, who went, when they went, the roof's in satisfactory condition, no damage found, no raised shingles, no loose flashing, things like that. Pretty awesome. Okay. This is a nationwide company, and I will show you, they have roof inspection photos in here as well. So they included those, which is good, just good record to have for insurance purposes. If there was to be a hail claim that came, you would have at least a bookmark in the process for your client in this process. Makes sense? I'll also show you that, show you termite here real quick. Obviously no visible evidence. You want to be looking here for those that haven't gone through inspection process before, but if there's visible evidence, are they dead? And that can be a distinguishment between, is there active treatment being recommended? And never be afraid to get a second opinion. Okay, so this home inspector, they inspected this property, and this is who went. I have an inspector that he can do pest inspection under a pest company's charter, which is a pretty cool thing to have an inspector be able to do. They're already in that crawl space anyway. Why wouldn't they just do the termite inspection at that time too? It's like kind of a no-brainer there. But I'll show you in the inspection summary or the inspection report. In this case, this buyer elected to have pillar and post. I think some of that was due to the availability. But I wanted to show you, and I'm sure many of you are familiar, but I wanted to show you that they did a great job on the HVAC and roof. I was really pleased with that. But I also wanted to kind of share and show you things that are important to me in choosing a home inspector. A lot of photos, arrows, and detail of where specific things are. This type of detail I like. Big arrow, very clear, what are we talking about here? Because ultimately, that's what we're trying to help educate our clients about and explain. So there's some that are just a lot of checkbox type stuff. I'm looking for narrative about this. I like the cleanliness of this. I've seen others that I like too, but this type of detail I'm very pleased with. Okay, those type of things. And so when evaluating inspectors, I would encourage them to provide you a sample report, other agents that are using them, things like that. And you can see, I'm glad to see they got up on the roof. Some inspectors just use a drone. This inspector actually got on the roof and was pretty specific about things. I also like showing you kind of this, he's explaining to them, and there's a lot of information here, especially for a first-time buyer, about general rules with regard to how does a roof wear. And they're important things to know. And then there's no better chance for you to become knowledgeable than like on your own house or to learn from these other inspection reports. Okay. So a lot of detail here, openings here, this little opening, you know, is a space for critters and things to get in. So an easy way, I tell them when we do the review with the client, we sit down and go over all of these things with them. We help them prioritize. I'd put this on an A, B, or C list. And it had helped them evaluate when should we be addressing certain things, like trimming these bushes away from the house. 2 views of just trimming bushes. Like, it's just really helpful. Explaining a maintenance tip. Rubber boots wear faster than the roof surfaces. These wear out, and this is often the cause of where there's a leak. But you won't see the leak right under here in the house. Water runs the path of least resistance, it's going to run downhill and leak likely closer to the wall rather than in the center of the room, because the roof is pitched up here. And I like diagrams that help educate the buyer about what does diverter flashing mean. It's a great chance for you to become educated too. You're a hit at parties when you can talk about diverter flashing, I assure you. At least with your real estate friends. And like, just, you know, what is this little, he's pointing to this, like, what is this? This is helpful, rather than somebody just saying, you've got some pop nail heads that need caulk on your chimney cap, you know, spurter valve. What? Okay. So these are the kinds of things that I'm looking for in an inspector. He might become my primary. You like him? Yeah, he is the GOAT. I'm pretty impressed. And I have other inspectors I really like, but I'm very pleased with this. And this was a recommendation based on availability of somebody else. It was kind of the plan B, and I really like him.
So good, I can barely get it, but he's my first call.
There you go. Yep. And so this is thermographic imaging. And so understanding that, so like, you know, that just, it's a good chance for you to become educated so you can better explain those things too. You know, this just shows where there's heat loss, the different colorization there. This is an attic pull down stair. It's a common place where it doesn't have insulation, because when you pull the stair down, obviously the insulation is going to fall and get on everything. So they make these little zip caps that go over the stairs. And so understanding what that looks like. Yeah, I mean, this type of detail is impressive. And really, you know, it just, we have licensing. You can explain it to your clients that the inspectors have to be licensed, but it only provides a certain level of standard. There's also real estate license too, but we can see the distinction in how much that prepares you, or the practicality nature of what you know based on just your license. Okay. How much did this cost? Let's see if he has it at the end. Here's another interesting thing, as I'm looking for that, often the invoices at the end. I love this detail about fungal spores. Don't always call it mold. It may not be mold, right? Fungal growth. Just because something's growing doesn't mean it's mold. That's a technical classification, so be mindful of that. Let's see. Do you recall, Rebecca, how much, the question was, how much was this report? I'm searching now. Let's see here. Let's go to the end. If his invoice is at the back. Front. No, so another inspector I use, his invoice is in there. He won't release it till he's paid, which I think is good practice, right? I mean, why should you? That's the only leverage you have to try to get paid. But nonetheless, I like this report. I'm very pleased. And you can see this is pillar to post. And is it Dumbovich? Dubovich? However you want to do it. But there you go. And so the mention here for those that are in Zoom land was he blew up half the deals that he had in 2020. And it's a funny but serious and relevant thing to discuss. And I know we're going over a bit here, but is an inspector being known as a deal killer. And you'd rather contextually prepare your buyer for what, and you want to be cautious in that conversation too in your use of language, right? Is this serious? The answer is never yes or no, right? It's always maybe, or it depends. Who are we to say, based on seeing this, if it's serious or not? And the common one that always comes up is, I'll show you, is cracks. Is this serious? Do you think it's structural? Probably not. I've seen hairline cracks. As long as they don't follow the brick, or as long as they're through the grout lines, you should be fine. Well, that's a very dangerous statement to make. And you'll see it and hear it all the time. I mean, we learn these pro tips that we want to share with them. And we're not even trying to lie. We're not trying to be wrong, but it's just what we hear or we know. But a professional structural engineer will tell you that is not necessarily true. There are times where that can be true. And so that's the language you want to adopt more to that. And I try to look at this language in here, and I appreciate these are other ways of discernment of your inspector, is to recommend settling crack with inappropriate exterior material or sealing it to prevent moisture intrusion to the block. If further settlement is noted, then future corrections may be required. So it's sort of taking it, that's right, it's monitor it. And I really, really appreciate and like that part of it. Now, I suggest scheduling a Zoom call when these inspections come in. So then you get all these back by the deadline. Schedule a Zoom call and walk through these things with them. Although ask them to review them prior to the Zoom call and put together their list of concerns and so that you can be prepared for that, right? Because I think, again, the more coaching you can give them about how the process goes, the better I think the more comfortable they are. It's that ambiguity that just makes them feel vulnerable and in the cold on it. So I'd highly recommend set up a Zoom call, walk through it with them, take them to the summary and what questions or concerns did you have? This is just part of the value that them understanding, like we've got wasps up here. How did they get in? Well, thankfully he showed that little spot there. If the inspector isn't as thorough as this, you can still put the story together when they show those things about what the risks are of wasps or squirrels or those kind of things. Okay. You can see it's showing a bigger photo, like we've got wasp nests and ants, also notations, what it is, what I'm looking at here. Because there's a lot going on right here. I'm not sure what it could be. I mean, I know what some of those things are, but a buyer likely doesn't. They don't understand all the pieces or components that's going on here. Okay. Questions? All right. Let's see if there was what else I had on our list that we wanted to cover. I don't think there was anything else. No other questions? Yes, that one I shared with you right there. These folks, Ostermiller. And they didn't tell us that it needed anything, even though you can see that an inspector noted a couple things, not urgent, but a couple things. But yes, these folks went out for free and didn't recommend anything. That's the part that surprises me, because you would think, kind of, I mean, that just seems logical, but the other thing that that we didn't talk about yet, and it relates to roofs, is the C.L.U.E report. And the C.L.U.E report is something that your buyers would request of their insurance vendor that likely they should have already or been speaking to at this time to get a quote for insurance on the home. The insurance provider will likely, and certainly upon request, they will pull a C.L.U.E report. It's like a Carfax report for a house, except it's typically just for insurance claims. So it tells the new insurer or the new provider of insurance what claims have happened on this house. And like, if there's been an insurance claim within a year, for hail and there's hail damage, well then, and there hasn't been any major hail in our area, then likely we've got a situation where somebody pocketed the money. And it happens more often than you might think, right? Somebody gets an insurance claim for a whole new roof, and you know, the HVAC system and the vinyl, they got paid $15,000 for a new roof, and maybe they just replaced part of the roof that was in the biggest damage. You know, I mean, they're not bad humans. They just were thinking they were doing something. Like, they wrote us this check. We didn't even ask for this check. They showed up and they literally will cut you a check that day to your personal name, and they put it in their bank account, 15,000 richer, and they find Joe Blow Roof Guy, and he'll like, no, he goes, we just need to do this section. And so the C.L.U.E report is another place where I think you can be of value and service to your buyers in suggesting that they pull a C.L.U.E report and be proactive on a listing to say, call your insurance person and pull the C.L.U.E report. Have you had any claims that were not corrected? It's helping give you the backstory, if you will. Helpful? Anybody out in Zoom land, what am I missing, or any other questions? All right, there's so much to cover in that. I appreciate you all so much. Good luck out there. Yep. Have a great, great day. Yes, Rebecca, wait, she says. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, I was off for a second. Did you get the plumbing further inspected or scoped question?
I didn't, and that's a great one to add. Thank you. Plumbing, scoping the plumbing. So in some of these older homes, the clay pipe sewer, you can have that scoped. And I don't recall offhand who did that recently on that Beacon Drive, but most of the major plumbers out there will. What's that? Yep, absolutely.
395-8042.
Diligent Home Inspection, I know will do that as well. Yeah, and they have a big bevy of inspectors, you know, that can handle a lot of things. I mean, they're pretty meticulous with things as well. So yes, thank you for bringing that up. That's another piece of the inspection process I would encourage, especially in an older home. Because those clay pipes, they've likely been driven over by the tree guy or something and can get squashed and collapse. And you might not know, but the sewage is sort of turned into a septic system where it's sort of just leaching into the yard. And you wouldn't know it if it's just doing it a natural progression, but it's something that eventually will need to be addressed. So when you go in if it's on a basement and you walk into the basement with your client, I'm often looking for, do I see any knob and tube wiring? Am I looking for any cast iron pipe, the old black pipe? Galvanized, you're looking for galvanized piping. So the cast iron would be the sewer. It's the bigger pipe that's taken stuff to the sewer. And the galvanized is typically more of a 1 inch or 3/4 that's bringing the water in. But that galvanized is like an artery that gets clogged and with calcium deposits and gets restricted. It's another reason I'm told by designers that you should avoid black hardware, or be mindful that because the white calcium shows up so prevalent in just around the seams of your plumbing faucets and fixtures, and that it's harder to keep. Yeah, interesting. I'd never thought about it. Yeah, well, no, I've seen it now too, because I went with a black kitchen faucet in this house. It's the first, I think, when I've gone black. I've had oil rub, bronze, and brass, and satin nickel, and all the things. But yeah, something to be mindful of if you're going with black on plumbing. But yeah, so galvanized piping is something that often will need to be replaced. You'll see it sends. There was a period where galvanized was the go-to, and then people went to copper, and now we're seeing people use PEX, which is the plastic. And we'll be doing another class. I did a field trip last week. Yeah, it was. I'm glad to hear it was. We had about 10 people, and it was everything from building a foundation to rough-ins, so pre-drywall. The next one will be drywall and beyond. And we'll do that in probably a month or so. Cool. I'll do the other one again. Absolutely. We'll try to record it somehow. It's hard to point out. There's so much happening on site. Anyhow, all right, y'all, we went way over. We appreciate you so much. Have a great day. If you need anything or questions on inspections, you can reach out to myself, to your broker, to your mentor, and good luck.
Thank you.
You're welcome.